Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 105, just giving you an insight of what we've got ahead and going to compare our analysis from last week as well. So as you know, we're going to start off with gold. So pretty much what we're looking at here from last week was this idea that price was probably going to push up higher, probably test this uptrend that we've got here, and then potentially we could start to see that sell off to potentially start to form. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this notion right now. Like price has pretty much done a similar thing like this, so price has started to develop nicely towards the upside. So what I'm thinking right now is we're at this 1830 level here. So if I just mark that out, what we could potentially see from this point is maybe this second scenario where price will just peak up to the upside and then potentially drop. But essentially we're just waiting for price to pretty much sell off, because that's the ultimate kind of direction where I think we could expect price to develop next. But yeah, this is just like a mild pullback or a mild type of correction, and then the idea is for really to just drop off. So we could expect price to preach above 18 or peak above 1830, and then potentially develop. It could then see signs of price dropping off. So I'm just gonna move this up here, get rid of that, and yeah, so that's pretty much the kind of dialogue that I'm going with. But yeah, that's the kind of basis right now, so we'll see what happens with that pair. So moving on to EU. So for this we had pretty much two scenarios. I was looking at price potentially selling off here, but what we ended up seeing is a blow through, and that leads me into my second scenario, which is just waiting for price to peak above 1.14 and then to potentially sell off. So we can see that there's some strong pressure coming in right now, so it's up to us to see if this is really going to continue, and look for those continuation trades lower. So ideally we're just probably going to have to wait for some sort of pullback and then really see where price can go. So if I go ahead and get rid of this, so pretty much waiting for price to develop into 1.12, that's the anticipated level. We're going to go ahead and get rid of 1.13 now because we've made our way into 1.14. So we've got this kind of barrier that we can just watch for and be mindful of, because there is a possibility that price could rally towards the upside. But I'm thinking more or less that price will want to go to 1.12 to follow on this kind of trend from up here. So I think this is just a mild type of correction or mild pullback. We could use this trend line just to give a bit more perspective, but I know it's quite steep, to be honest. But we can probably do something like that too, just to these trend lines that break, they're just kind of like pre-warning that this is most likely going to develop to the downside potentially. But yeah, we'll see what can come from EU, but ultimately looking for some sells. Looking at NZDUSD, so with this pair, what we can see right now is price developed into that trend line that we spoke about. We see that price has rallied essentially to the upside. So what I'm trying to see for now is to see how price can react to this downtrend. So if we go ahead and get rid of this, what we could possibly see is maybe one more test into this area of 0.69, and then what we'll see from this is either a continuation higher or we'll get that rally and sell off, and that would be like a good point where we could look for potential sells. So that's something I'm looking into here. But the other scenario that we could potentially have, and I'm not really too keen on this idea, but is if price was to continue going higher, then it would be pretty much looking to go a lot further up. But I'm not really too convinced right now because of the way price is selling off so strong here. So this could obviously easily be taken out, but this is still a potential. So might as well keep both ideas in mind, or both aspects. So yeah, so moving on to AUDUSD. So if we take a look at what we had anticipated from last week, was pretty much this price, capability of pushing up, and then you could have been looking at taking buys here, and then the idea was there could have been a potential sell-off. So what we're going to see for now is this sell-off going to continue, or is it going to rally back up again? So I probably will move this as a second scenario. But what I'm looking into for this is if this sell-off can continue to push to the downside, then we can wait for that scenario, a retest play. But if price is willing to break a lot higher, we can wait for price to find that kind of exhaustion, and then hopefully we could start to look for those sell-off in price points. A useful kind of trend line that I'm looking at is this one. So effectively looking at this uptrend here to see if if we do get into some contact here, we could look at a retest off of this, and then wait for price to sell off into 0.7. But that's kind of a good look, or what I'm thinking that could come for this week. So taking a look at UJ. So for this one, we were looking for actual continuations just a little bit higher. Now for this, I am quite convinced that we're capable of seeing that still, but we are getting very close to invalidating that. So pretty much this zone here at the bottom, I think I'm going to go ahead and refine this to 150, 115.5, and then we're looking at 1.17. So what we were looking at from last week was this idea that price may want to continue to rally up higher, but completely dropped off. So there is this possibility that we could technically still get this rally to the upside, even though that this does look very bearish. I am still kind of curious to see if we can potentially push higher, but this is where we're going to have to make a deciding play on this pair. So this one is not necessarily too convincing, but we basically have both biases where that we know that price needs to push back up to some degree to recover this strength and the move to the downside. Obviously it doesn't have to, but whilst price is hovering around 1.14, there is a possibility that as price stands, that price may want to push up a little bit to some degree, and technically retrace this whole move. So with that being said, we could look at some minor buying positions, but just be mindful that price could, if it starts to push up higher, it could potentially start to sell off again. So here is pretty of a tricky one for UJ. We're in this kind of we're looking at buying, but then if we start to see signs of weakness to the upside, we could be looking at that sell opportunity to the downside, and then that is when effectively we could be looking to take out 113, and potentially push even lower. So effectively we could be looking at a push up higher, or we could effectively be looking at a push lower. So with that, we have to look for the buys early on in the week or sells through the midweek. So in terms of the steps, I'm going to be looking at like buys, and then midway through the through the day or through the week, we could be just be keeping our eyes open for that sell-off. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're trying to go. And then from here, if we do get to the upside, it's going to be a deciding factor again, if this is going to hold or if this is going to completely reverse, because I think that ultimately long term we should be heading downwards. So this is why this sell-off will make sense to break the 113 and into 112. But yeah, I won't really draw that. I'll just leave this move up for now, because there's still quite a lot of pips to the upside if this does work. But yeah, okay, rambling on. But moving on to CADJPY. Let's take a look. So for this, what I've got printed in my notes pretty much is an upside move possibility. So what we got from last week was the idea that price could sell off, and it would have to intentionally break a lot lower. So as we can see here, there's been a minor sell-off opportunity, but if we were to put price into like a channel, we can see that we're kind of playing within these lines here. So just channeling off using some trend lines, just basic stuff really. We can see that price is kind of like just ranging. I don't really see that price could potentially sell off a lot further, but if we start to break this a lot lower, so let me just move this aside. So if we start to see price completely break this downtrend, maybe into 90, we could expect like a pullback into 90.5 or something like that. Again, these are not, price doesn't have to obviously come to these exact points, but essentially the idea is that price will, if it does break, we're going to get a retest. So that's essentially what I'm trying to say. And whether the price wants to make a deep retracement or a minor retracement, that's just something that you're going to have to take into perspective. Again, it could be a small retracement, it could just go up like a little bit back up and then drop off, or it could be a massive retracement and then drop off. So again, this is where your risk management comes into play, and not going too crazy with your entries. You don't have to call the tops and bottoms. Personally, I don't really think you should do that. I just think you should just go wherever price action is telling you, really. So yeah, so the other option that we're discussing or potentially looking at is for price to probably or to potentially make its way to the upside. So in terms of altering the channel, if we do start to see a break above 92, we could use we can alter the channel or the top side of the trend line and just look at this midline and also the top line as well, just as a little level of caution, or just like a little point to look at. But yeah, this basically just gives you like another way to look at resistance without needing to go too far backwards in price data, if that makes sense. But if you can kind of use both of them, using both the confluences of previous time resistances, so going back in data, you can use this as resistance and match it up with the top line of the trend line. Maybe that's something that you can incorporate in your own strategy. But yeah, essentially that's how I kind of look at price moves as well. So that's just like a little gem I'm throwing in. But yeah, so essentially what I'm trying to look at here is a possibility that price could push up to the upside and then have that sell-off that we're kind of looking for. So really, this is like a really good opportunity for sells, in my opinion. Again, it really is a deciding factor if we do get that sell-off, but again, this is where we need to manage our positions and just be mindful. So I am looking at around 88 if we do get that sell-off, so let's just see what happens with this pair. So let's take a look into EJ. So with EJ, essentially, I'm trying to see if price has that ability now to to sell off, and what we can expect is a possibility that if we do get that sell-off, that we could come all the way back into 127.5, which is obviously a very long way down. Potentially speaking, a good 300 or so pips. But what I'm thinking is, just judging from last week's analysis, I believe we were around 7th, so yeah, around here. So we were roughly around here. The analysis was basically that we were going to expect some sort of turnover into the market. Now, even though I did say, or I think, well, just because I've annotated it, there was a possible, we could have expected price to push up and then turn to the downside. We didn't really get that. you know, obviously we saw an early sell-off without peaking above 1.5. So this position to me, you know, was the second scenario. So we could have looked at some buying positions, but I don't know if this is going to roll over to the upside. So what I'm now looking at is pretty much this sell bias and sticking with it. So I'm going to, for now, I'm going to move this here as a significant level. But what I'm curious to see now is if we can get a pullback and continue on those sells, because I'm curious to see if this can hold, because this sell-off pressure is quite strong. A lot of, you know, EMA is turning over. I'm not sure, but with the RSI, but there is mild divergences forming, so showing weakness of momentum. So there is a possibility that this could, you know, essentially roll over. So it's a possibility, and then it could match into this idea that we could see 127 being hit. So we'll have to see through this week, but this upside is going to be a deciding factor. So if we start to peak above 1.315, you know, there is a possibility that this could happen where we get continuations, or we could get that sell-off. So I'm just going to leave those here just as a pre-warning around this level, but for now I'm looking for sells, so we'll see where we can take ourselves with that pair. So moving on to AUDJPY. So with this, I'm still looking for essentially buys towards the upside. I think what we spoke about last week was this possibility that price may, you know, want to manipulate the uptrend right now. And yeah, as we can see, price is pretty much, you know, it tapped into that trend line, pushed up, and then came back down again. So it didn't necessarily fulfill that upside target that we were looking at. So what does this kind of show? Well, I think that this could possibly indicate another fake out possibility, because technically we're still, you know, we didn't really retest anything. We've just tested this low. If for us, you know, I'm looking at 80 for like that very significant reversal flip, in which we take sells, for example. But I'm looking at how price is around here, and we just have to investigate really what's going to happen. So what I'm thinking is, you know, price could have this ability to push up higher. Again, what I've spoke about with trend lines you know, it is pretty much contradicting what I said from last week, because what I said was that we could get a manipulation here and then continue to push up higher. But, you know, sometimes, you know, it's a bit of a hit of a miss with trend lines, in my opinion. For me, what will make this much more confident in taking a sell is if we get some, you know, a bit more stronger sell-off pressure. I mean, this does look quite strong in any man's eyes, but what I'm not really liking is just pretty much how price, you know, just is not really falling off completely. And also it's the end of the week, so with that it could show that there is going to be, you know, potential reversal through Monday, and then midweek we could get that sell-off. So, you know, this, you know, in my eyes, tying the trend lines together could the fake out of the trend line, so that could be something that we can look at. We can also tie in some of the channels, so this is another thing that I've got in my notes. So here, so, you know, if we start to break, you know, a lot lower than this level here, we could anticipate, you know, if we do get a strong break lower here, then that, you know, could be another warning sign that, yeah, price is now developing lower. So, you know, something like this, you know, a deeper retracement, etc., and then we could see price drop off. But, you know, it's just something that I'm going to keep in perspective here. I'll leave this down channel in just for you guys. But yeah, either way that you look at this, you know, I'm seeing this as a potential move towards the upside. So looking at 84.5, even 85. So we'll see where this can go to. But yeah, that's pretty much the move that I'm looking out for AJ. So coming into USDCHF, now this one has been, you know, this one has been quite good in terms of that sell-off opportunity. So So yeah, a nice 100 or so pips there. So yeah, so what we was ideally looking at for here, yeah, it was pretty much a move to the downside, and as we can see, prices basically fulfilled that. So what we are now looking at now is looking at 91, how it's reacting. You can see that we're seeing some sort of pullback forming. So what I'm trying to see for now is to see if we can potentially break lower and then to potentially break higher. Now that we've fulfilled a potential sell-off, the idea is that we could eventually make our way back up. So I'm not entirely too sure how far just yet, but essentially, we're going to be expecting potential prices to, it can make a new low and then go higher, or this could be, this could start the reversal, so it could start to do something like this. So in that case, if we start to see higher price moves, then we can look at a retest. If we start to then see a drop off, then we can start to look at potential buys. And then I feel like a nice level would be 93. I got it marked out here, but if you were to go back test 93, I feel like it's a very strong level. But yeah, in my opinion, we could be looking at price to eventually make its way to the upside, but in due time, it doesn't have to rush. So that's why these two scenarios could be taking effect. So with that also being said, with the second scenario here more so, if we start to see price pushing up and then we start to see that weakness, there could be a sell-off, a little sell-off in price. So if you want to take that counter trend, by all means, definitely be a part of that if you want to. But yeah, I feel like there could be a possible sell-off opportunity, which would make sense for like that weakness and exhaustion in price, for it to then potentially go higher. So something that I'm looking out for USDCHF. And then finally for USDCAD. So for this, what we was expecting is pretty much, we was expecting price to make a rejection off 1.26, but completely blew through it. So a huge sell-off in price. So what I'm looking at now is that second scenario that we've got here that we spoke about last week. So the idea here is that we're going to possibly see a nice reversal forming soon. So whether price comes up a little bit further and then pulls back a little bit, or it starts to make a new low and then pushes up, that's ideally where we could what we could expect. So with that, what I'm trying to think about is just really how price is moving, and we're potentially looking to target 1.28. So we do have a good amount of pips up for grabs if we can get ourselves into this buying option. So that's ideally where I'm thinking about for the next few days or so for USD CAD. So wrapping up this week, there was some good moves last week, but yeah, equally there's more opportunities this week. So we'll see if we can get involved with some of the moves. But yeah, hopefully I've shown you some kind of outlines of where I'm thinking and the potential moves for this week. So hopefully there are some pips that you can grab. But yeah, if you did get any value from this video, feel free to leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys back next week in our next week's video. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you all very soon, guys. Thank you.